We have here Mick Jones and Paul Simonon of The Clash with us directly this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Very nice of you to come in. Right. So, before we get going, I'd like you to explain exactly. I believe there's a compendium of The Clash that people can get if they wish. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a box set called Sound System, and it's got all the Clash albums except for one, and it's all been remastered, and it's been specially designed by Paul, the box itself, and it's very...
And the insides.
And the insides, but except for, well, yeah, the music is inside it, but there's a lot of other stuff.
I remember getting an Elvis, or seeing, I couldn't afford it, an Elvis Presley compilation, and it was like this special bestie compilation, and it cost 50 quid in sort of 1970 or something. But in it, you got a tiny little patch of his suit. That's what it said, anyway, and maybe a lock of his hair. But that's a fantastic idea. This is what I like, bits and stuff. Let's play something from it. We're going to play Clash City Rockers first. Tell us about this song, though. What was your memories of this song?
Well, when it was first released, or they sped it up, because the idea was that if you sped tracks up, then for older artists you sound younger. You also sound like the Chipmunks. But anyway, so it got sped up by somebody, and then that was the last thing that they did with us. And then we got it back. We've got it back to the normal speed now.
Excellent. So it's at the proper speed.
Yeah.
For the first time ever.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm sure there was...
On this show.
Actually, yeah. I've just remembered something. I remember we had a punch-up, me and Mick, and he wasn't talking to me. I wasn't
Who
talking
came
to
out
him.
best?
Well, none of us, really, at the end
There's
of the day.
never any winners.
No.
But I remember Mick had to tell Joe what the chords were to then go over to where I was to tell me what the chords were.
We weren't talking to each other. I was telling.
And
it
there's actually a
Joe.
photo session that we did at the same time, which I've actually got a Polaroid of. You're one side of the room, and I'm on the other side of the room.
You know Janus, the
Yes.
face, two faces.
Yes.
We were like this. I thought we were about to have a duel, actually. 10 steps.
Yeah, well, that's the way to communicate. And so knowing that so how difficult... I think it will make listening to the track all the more enjoyable, knowing how difficult it was just communicating some of the chords.
That's right. It was like, tell him it's an A,
Yeah.
and then he'd go over.
Yeah.
And he'd go like, tell him to... off.
Yeah. Let's hear Clash City Rockers. Clash City Rockers. And I'm delighted to say that we have Mick Jones and Paul Simonon with us here this evening, undergoing some routine inquiries. What a great group. I love The Clash. What a great group it was. Now, it must have been, at the time, did you feel, because it was right at the beginnings of all that punk movement in London, really, and things were different, things were all changing. But being in the centre of it all, did it feel like there was stuff changing, or did it, how was it being in the centre of it for you?
We was too busy in the centre of it to really, we were just focused more on our next show and getting ourselves together and just travelling up and down the country and abroad. So really, one wasn't fully aware of being in the middle of anything, even though there was obviously affinity between us and the Pistols because of the Bernie Rhodes, our manager, connection with Malcolm McLaren. So, because it was Bernie Rhodes' idea, who suggested that John Lydon should be the singer of the Pistols. So there was a lot of shared elements, and also Mick was good friends with Glenn Matlock. So
We were close. It was a close-knit scene. It was quite arty at the start, the very original punks. But I remember Malcolm saying one time, don't think... it doesn't do you good to think about it too much, It's just
let Bernie do the thing.
Yeah. Let your manager think
just sign
for you.
here.
So,
don't you start thinking about all of that.
We were like that anyway. They didn't have to encourage us not to think. We were like that anyway, So
They'd pick
it
the right
was
bloke.
very much like that. So it was, when you're in the middle of it, you don't really know what's going on, to be honest with you. It's only like now with 35 years grace, you can look back and... try to make head nor tail of it.
Well, it was
Our
great.
job was to come up with the goods, really.
Mick, we were talking about nice records that you liked early on. I mean, when did you first start here? When did you first realise you wanted to be involved with music?
Well, I was about 2, actually, or 2 or 3, and I was in Mitcham and I saw the Lifeboys band marching down the road, and I think that was my original musical memory anyway, and I think probably I always liked a bit of a brass band as well. You know, I particularly like, you know, American high school bands, they call it drumline.
Yeah.
And they twirl their cymbals and do fantastic, like, contemporary songs. Like, you've never heard It Ain't Over Till It's Over by Lenny Kravitz till you've heard it played by a drumline band, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
I would say as I grew up, and how do you do that, or how do you do that? And, you know, like family gatherings when I was a kid, I just jump up on the table and do a little turn, and so I think it was always going to be...
What sort of turn would you do?
I'd do a little spin and a little song.
On the table?
Yes.
Up to what sort of age?
About 28 or something.
Feet in the porridge. That's very good. But was it a musical household you were in?
A bit. My mum had a lot of Elvis records and stuff, you know what I mean? We had a record player, and so I was always part... And radio was on all the time, and that's where we come to 1, 2, 3 by Len Barry.
Well, I remember like 1, 2, 3 by Len Barry. I remember hearing it, and to me, I don't know when I must have been about 6 or something like that when it came out. That's what I imagine I was, only 6 or 8 or something. But I heard it, and it sounded like the glamorous world that I was seeing on the television that Roger Moore, I imagined, lived in, or something like this, or Danger Man or something. Because it just, the whole thing, and his name, Len Barry, God. Great. It sounded just, you know, you couldn't make that up. I don't know if that was his name or not. And then somebody told me he was from Enfield.
To me, it was like a kind of an instruction. I thought life was going to be easy, because I thought it was 1, 2, 3, it's so easy.
Yes, yeah.
I thought it was going to be like that.
It's
somehow,
like taking candy from a baby.
Yes.
That's what gives us the clue to probably be an American, you see. He's probably American.
He is American.
Well, we'll look him up in the meantime and find out more about Len Barry. But let's hear it. I love this record.
It's easy. Third boxcar, midnight train.
Now, this evening, how marvellous it is, as chosen by Paul Simonon, who is here with Mick Jones from The Clash this evening. How marvellous it is to have you both here. Now, I'd like to get back to your music now. You can hear Jamaican music being an influence on The Clash. I'll be right in saying that.
Very much so, in all different ways. Like, for instance, we both grew up in South London, and it was like high West Indian population, as you know, and they used to hear the music all around. And
well, it's more like if you went to school. Well, the school I went to down in Brixton, Effra, there'd be like a lot of the kids there. Their parents would come over on the Windrush, and obviously put them into school. And Ladbroke Grove or Brixton was a sort of pretty deprived area, so it was cheap rent really. And so you started hanging out with your friends from school, and you go over to each other's house and either sort of, I don't know, play with your Action Man if they'd come out by then, maybe not, and just hang out. But I remember being at a couple of friends' houses where they'd play some music, and which I later found out was called ska. But yeah, it was sort of an exposure to seeing another cultural way of living, you know, and it was always strange because we didn't have a picture of the Queen on our wall, but they did.
And also, I didn't think it was forced in any way, because it was the music that was around, part of the music that was around us, you know. And so we just grew up quite very naturally, and so that's why it wasn't like we were just copying it.
Yeah. And it's not like you're doing a copy a reggae cover script or something, but
sure.
You can hear the elements of that music somehow.
Yeah.
What other music was influencing you?
Well, it was very interesting. I liked when the records came over from Jamaica, they were very basic. But what they did over here for the English audiences or British audiences, they used to put a fantastic string arrangement on records, like, for instance, Young, Gifted and Black, or all those records from around, those Trojan records from around about that time. They got them into a studio and they'd knock it out, string arrangements that were really fascinating. It was like added a bit of that. Something else to it, you know what I mean? For English taste,
really.
You know, like a big thing with me was like musicals as well. You know, like actually show musicals, but the films of them, Oliver, you know, Lionel Bart and My Fair Lady, Lerner and Lowe, things like that had a big influence. You know, about the tune side of things.
Yeah.
So there was always that as well.
But the early 70s was an interesting period because growing up listening to sort of rock steady, which then became reggae, I sort of felt, because the school I went to was pretty run down and it had quite a strong black contingent there, that a lot of the songs that started coming out were sort of more radical, you know, like bands like Burning Spear, and it was more about black consciousness. So I felt sort of alienated it in that sort of way. But fortunately enough for me, I sort of felt I'd, in a sort of roundabout way, sort of try and discover something about my roots or whatever. And then Ted Carroll's shop was around the corner on Goulburn Road, and I used to go there a lot, and they used to play a lot of rockabilly, and, you know, sort of Eddie Cochran and Vince Taylor and a variety of black and white artists.
It was nice, the original rock-on shop in the little back of a little market in Goulburn Road. So you go through the second-hand clothes stalls first, and then there'd be like a little tea place where there'd be teddy boys sitting there having the cups of tea, and then at the very back was the one stall, and it was the record store. Before they had the one in Camden or Chiswick Records or anything. It was just like doing with the people right on one-to-one, you know.
The other thing is, of course, Paul, but I do have to ask about is you're an amazing painter, and have had people love your paintings, and you've always painted,
yes,
which is something you've always done.
Yeah.
Can people hope to see an exhibition of your paintings again soon?
Well, I was hoping to have one this year, but I've been sort of me and Mick have been too busy the last couple of years working on this box set, so I've put it all to one side. But once we've finished sort of promoting this compendium of Clash music, I will be back in the studio to finish a few pictures, hopefully next year. I'm all set to go, actually. I've got all the paintings, but it's just trying to find a gallery that I'm happy with.
Did you used to paint when you were on tour, when the Clash were going around, and did you used to have your easel set up there and others barging around? And...
No, I didn't. I was too busy trying to, in the beginning, too learn how to play the bass. and also, but then I sort of put a lot of thought into the our visual side of things of the Clash.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's been fantastic having you guests here this evening. We're going to go out on one of the
Oh, we're going to play Armageddon Time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. So tell us about it. Tell us about this.
It's the end of the world, man.
It's the end of the world. It's the end of the show.
As well.
Worse things could happen, could they?
And it's by Willie Williams, and it's a well-known reggae rhythm.
Excellent. Thank you for being our guest this evening, Paul Simonon and Mick Jones of The Clash.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We weren't talking to each other. I was telling
and
you.
There's actually a photo session that we did at the same time, which I've actually got a Polaroid of. You're one side of the room, and I'm on the other side of the room.
You know Janus, the face, two faces.
Yes.
We were like this. I thought we were about to have a duel, actually. 10 steps.
Yeah, well, that's the way to communicate. And so knowing that there's... So how difficult... I think it will make listening to the track all the more enjoyable, knowing how difficult it was just communicating.
And it's been specially designed by Paul, the box itself, and it's very...
And the insides.
And the insides. But except for... Well, yeah, the music is inside it, but there's a lot of other stuff.
I remember getting an Elvis, or seeing, I couldn't afford it, an Elvis Presley compilation, and it was like this special bestie compilation, and it cost 50 quid in sort of 1970. But in it, you got a tiny little patch of his suit. That's what it said, anyway, and maybe a lock of his hair. But that's a fantastic idea. This is what I like, bits and stuff. Let's play something from it. We're going to play Clash City Rockers first. Tell us about this song, though. What was your memories of this song?
Well, when it was first released, or they sped it up, because the idea was if you sped tracks up, then for older artists you sound younger. You also sound like the Chipmunks. But anyway, so it got sped up by somebody, and then that was the last thing that they did with us.
We have here Mick Jones and Paul Simonon of The Clash with us directly this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Very nice of you to come in. Right. So, before we get going, I'd like you to explain exactly. I believe there's a compendium of The Clash that people can get if they wish. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a box set called Sound System, and it's got all the Clash albums except for one, and it's all been remastered. and then we got it back. We've got it back to the normal speed now.
Excellent. So it's at the proper speed.
Yeah.
For the first time ever.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm sure there
On this
was
show.
Actually,
Yeah.
I've just remembered something. I remember we had a punch-up, me and Mick, and he wasn't talking to me. I wasn't
Who
talking
came
to him.
out best?
Well, none of us really at the end
There's
of the day.
never any winners.
No.
But I remember Mick had to tell Joe what the chords were to then go over to where I was to tell me what the chords were.